Welcome to Roots of Representation, a podcast series brought to you by Knology, a leading organization creating practical social science for a better world. The podcast series is a part of our larger National Science Foundation-funded project called Black Rep for Kids, where we delve into the power of storytelling in helping young Black children prepare for and tackle the challenges of climate change. If you're interested in learning about how we can build a brighter climate future for Black children, their families, and their communities, you've come to the right place. Let's get started with Roots of Representation, the podcast centering Black climate story worlds for young minds. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Leah Austin, an accomplished, multifaceted, and visionary leader who has been working on behalf of Black children and their families for over 2 decades. Leah is currently president and CEO of the National Black Child Development Institute, which is on the forefront of engaging leaders, policymakers, professionals, and parents around critical and timely issues that directly impact Black children and their families. Dr. Austin, welcome to Roots of Representation.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're happy to have you here and to get a chance to talk with you. We've invited you to explore some of the climate-related challenges Black families and communities are facing and to hear a little bit about your insights into best practices for communicating with young children and their parents about climate change. And we'd love to also talk about how this connects your work at NBCDI and your experiences as a member of the Aspen Institute and Early Years Climate Task Force. I know we only have so much more time, but more generally, let's start things off. And could you share something you'd like us to know about you, and then some thoughts about what you are seeing as the most serious impacts of climate change on Black children and their families, and in your life as a mom?
Well, thank you, Ed, for that question. I will share with you first and foremost that I am a mom of a 10-year-old son, someone who I think about quite often in my, obviously in my personal life, but also in my professional life, because the organization that I have the privilege of leading is an organization focused on the strengths and the needs of Black children and their families. And so it's work that for me is personal, it's professional, it's every single day. And so I start off just sharing that. And then I would say that in terms of something interesting about me connected to my work, in addition to being a mom, is that I have been the CEO of NBCDI for 3 years, but I actually have a really long relationship and connection with the organization. I started off over 25 years ago as an intern at NBCDI. And at that time, our founder, Evelyn Moore, was actually still in the seat of president and CEO. And so I named that just to really name how committed to this organization and to this work. And again, the linkage between it being both professional and personal for me in pretty much every aspect of my life. In addition to those two elements, I guess what I would say we are really understanding about the serious impacts of climate change on Black children and families is that first and foremost, I think there's an acceptance and an understanding, we're getting closer to an acceptance and understanding that climate change is a threat to everyone's physical health, their mental health, etc. But the reality, unfortunately, is that while it impacts everyone, it does not do so equally. And that Black children and families in particular are much more vulnerable to the negative impacts of climate change. And one of the reasons why, a major reason why, is actually because of environmental injustice. And so at NBCDI, we are often trying to bring awareness to the linkage between the two. So some ways I talk about it is that, it's not, we think about climate change often as like, oh, well, Mother Nature is kind of, things are just somehow changing. It's not that. It's not that Mother Nature just doesn't like human beings anymore, right? Or that Mother Nature has a particular issue with Black people. It's really the impact of human choices that have been made that are causing the climate to change and then impact certain communities, such as Black communities, differently. A few specific things I can go into are, given this link between environmental justice and climate change, we are finding that some of the most serious impacts on Black children and families are really coming from extreme heat, from having dirtier water, having to breathe and live within more polluted air. And this is really happening because Black children and families often live in older homes and attend older, less resourced schools that may not have the greatest insulation. And in some examples, actually just like literally, especially schools, don't have air conditioning, don't have the proper air conditioning and circulation that people need. We've also found from our research, and this is something I actually learned on the Climate Action Task Force, which I know we'll talk about, is this element of shade inequity, which basically says that in many communities of color and lower income communities, there are fewer green spaces, there are fewer trees, there are fewer parks. And so literally our communities don't have as much shade, and so can find ourselves in a place where it can be up to 10 degrees warmer in a Black community and neighborhood. And so when you couple that or you triple that with unequal access to medical care, with unequal access to grocery stores, which, as I mentioned earlier, lower or under-resourced schools, you just find that Black children and families have this cumulative disadvantage that then can lead to things like higher rates of cancer, higher blood pressure, higher rates of asthma. Even COVID-19 is being linked to some of these climate change impacts. And then lastly, especially when we talk about children, we're also seeing that there's some linkages here between behavioral and academic differences. And a quick story that I often share, or an example that I share with people, is if you think about how you, no matter what age you are, but let's just say you as an adult, how if you're in a space that does not have great insulation or doesn't have great air conditioning, and it's really hot, and there are a lot of people around you, you can find yourself feeling very agitated, and maybe, you want to act out. Maybe you just want to get everyone away from you, or you can't focus and concentrate on the task at hand. And we're seeing that those are behaviors that then for many Black children are the kinds of the behaviors that aren't linked to climate change, aren't linked to that sort of impact, but are more so linked to there's just something inherently wrong with this child. And then we see children being suspended, or their academic achievement is not showing up to the degree that we know it could show up via test scores. But there are these linkages here that we just have to continue to be aware of and to really understand. And that's a lot of the work that NBCDI is trying to do, is really bring awareness to these issues and to the impact of climate change on Black children and families.
Wow, I thank you so much for shaping that overview, Leah, because this is very important, and it's the kind of question that we've asked all our podcast guests, and it's interesting to see how people's responses highlight these unique challenges that are posed to the health and well-being of Black children. So I'm going to say to our audience, if listeners have additional thoughts, please add them to our comment section and share with us. So next, we'd like to ask you a little bit more about what you talked about regarding the organization's connections between the work that goes on with Black children and the efforts to combat climate change. In other words, there's an interconnection there that you've talked a little bit about. Share a little bit more about some of the ways the organization makes those connections clearer or more prevalent for members and others.
Absolutely. So the ways in which we do that are, first and foremost, NBCDI, the National Black Child Development Institute, is a national organization we sort of act and behave as a think tank. And so our belief is that we really need to bring forward awareness, again, to both the strengths and the needs of Black children and families. And so what does that look like? Like, we can talk about, as we've just talked about, the needs, the ways that, inequities show up in the lives of Black children and families. But what often happens is we, the collective we, lean on kind of strategies, potential solutions that come from the same sort of expertise, and actually, quite frankly, don't get us what we need to get. Because if they did, we would be having a completely different conversation. It often feels like Groundhog Day. Like, we're talking about the same issues generation after generation. And we at NBCDI believe that one of the core reasons why is because we're not actually truly looking to and leaning on and leveraging the expertise of the very communities that we are talking about, or that we're even, working on behalf of. And so in BCDI, we have now set ourselves up to be an institute where that Black expertise is able to be amplified and is able to be leveraged. And so that's like the core of our work. We're really thinking about and drawing connections to the relationship between mental models and narratives and systems change. What we like to do in nonprofit sector work and social impact work for all our goodness, and what we're all in this work because we want to serve and make life better for everyone. Truly, I truly believe that is why the majority of us are in this work. But one of the major challenges we have is that when we look at systems change and we look at like the iceberg model, we really, as a field, as people, because it feels a little bit easier to focus on the tip of the iceberg, to focus on events that happen and then to react to them, to focus on policies, programs, and practices. And of course, there's all important. It all works together. But underneath the iceberg, at the core, at the foundation of the iceberg, are mental models. And those are the beliefs and the assumptions we hold about each other that keep the system in place. And so at NBCDI, we're actually working below the iceberg. We're working at the mental models level to say, okay, what are the assumptions and beliefs? What are the mental models that we hold about Black children and families that keep the various systems at play, that continue to keep Black children and families not having the ability to really thrive in the ways that are really their human and civil rights to do. And so for us, climate is one of those issues. And so we have these 8 outcomes that I can, talk about for hours, but we have 8 outcomes that we have committed to as an organization that are really the foundation of what we believe is required for every Black child to have a healthy development, especially during the early childhood period of from birth to age 8. And so when we did our strategic planning work, when we were co-designing with our communities, our affiliate network, our council of elders, partners, just really leaning on proximity experts to understand what the needs and the issues that we should focus on were. Climate, in particular, this, as I mentioned earlier, this relationship between environmental justice and climate change and how it shows up specifically around air quality and water quality, that continued to come up as an area that our community said they wanted to see NBCDI really focus on. And so it's one of our 8 outcomes. And the outcome, again, for us specifically is that we're working to ensure that every Black child has access to clean air and clean water.
I am grateful for the 8 essential outcomes and have relied heavily on them to continue to keep my focus, because I know when we were beginning some initial conversations about Black Rep for Kids, The whole area of clean air and water was one piece, but the other part had to do with how do we represent what people feel and believe about their well-being, and drawing from the community itself, and particularly the Black community, is important. And so these essential outcomes are also, for me, related to things like Black futurity, how we look at our future, Black resilience, and Black joy. So with those kinds of things in mind, talk a little bit more about how that's an aspect of what we also are focusing on, especially in relationship to how these 8 essential outcomes that are really envisioning a world in which every Black child thrives is grounded.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as you know, I am really, really inspired by actively learning and studying Afrofuturism. And I, like many people, probably was introduced to Afrofuturism more recently with a Black Panther and, kind of in this entertainment space. But as I did, so sort of 2 things were happening for me at the same time. As I was researching and understanding Afrofuturism, I really began to understand that this wasn't something that was just about entertainment. There is obviously an entertaining value to it, but that's not just what it is. It is actually a philosophy. It's a theory. It's a way of being. There are steps you can actually take to employ Afrofuturism in the world, right? And so I was thinking about and looking at Afrofuturism, and also at the same time, and maybe actually, if I think about the order, my interest in futurism probably came a little bit beforehand. I learned about futurism as this thing that a lot of corporate organizations do, which is basically what they do is they have departments that look at the patterns, the trends, the behaviors of their customers or their consumer base. And they come up with scenarios, and they sort of answer some questions about what's possible, what's probable, what's our preferred. What are the ways in which we see our customers behaving and acting, and what do we want to sort of do? How do we sell a product to them? And so I actually found a University of Houston has a program on strategic foresight. And I attended and received a certification in strategic foresight, and was so, I was kind of amazed, maybe not so surprised, but amazed that in my cohort of, I think we were probably about 20, 25 people, I was the only Black woman and the only person in like the nonprofit social impact sector. And I just was like, oh, that's so interesting. What is this about? And that led me to sort of kind of learn more about the field, and then also tie in with this Afrofuturism. And so I really started to understand and find this interest in how can we apply futurism to social impact work? How could we apply futurism, Afrofuturism in our case, to the nonprofit sector, to the work that we want to do on behalf of Black children and families? And so when I came to NVCDI, that was what the opportunity to come and lead this organization really presented, was a way for us to really formalize this process of applying Afrofuturism to our work, and to really thinking about what it means to ensure that Black children have a healthy and thriving development. And so sort of practically speaking, what that looks like for us is it really does look like being a part of commissions and task forces, and also convening and sort of not just being invited to sit at a table, but leveraging the experience, the expertise of Black people to convene tables and to bring people to our tables. And again, really leverage our intelligence, our expertise, and our experience to design the solutions and the strategies that are going to improve our lives. So in many ways, it's almost taking like a community engagement model to a whole different level, because it's not just engaging people and saying, hey, what do you think? Or just checking a box that you talk to a person of color about an idea you were already doing. It's really saying, like, we can't create anything if we don't have Black expertise, voices, leadership at the table, and really in the decision-making seat. And so that is the way that we have built NBCDI out. And the way that we look at each of our 8 outcomes is, what does it look like for us to convene and bring this intelligence and this expertise to the table to then design strategies and solutions that will be good for Black children and families.
Well, I think once again, I'm excited to have you frame these particular types of concepts, because this whole notion of building self-efficacy. In other words, if I don't see myself on the solutions building side of things, or the creation side of things, and only see myself portrayed as victims of climate or victims of these things, that we don't get to have much movement. So I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing this type of insight to the work. And it's been very helpful to me to be able to have, your leadership and guidance on that, because as we talk about, one of the other outcomes, essential outcomes, is that every Black child will have books and toys that reflect who they are and who they can be. When I combine that with what you just described and this notion of Black futurity, that is an element of resilience that I get excited about. And so absolutely. I want to ask you, in terms of what you've just described, you were a member of the Aspen Institute early years climate task force, which was convened by Capita, and this is Planet Ed. And one of the task force recommendations was that we need to research best practices in communicating with young children and their parents about climate change. So are there any ways that you think the Black Rep for Kids project offers an opportunity to act on this, or to build in the direction that you have as a vision for NBCDI?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say that you just named it in terms of the self-efficacy. So one of the major issues with the ways in which we talk about climate change, sort of represent climate change, is that Black people, communities of color, are often either invisible completely, or are in the victim seat, are in the seat of, all of these bad things happen and then that's it, right? But what that creates is a sort of climate anxiety. And this is terminology that I learned. Actually, I believe I learned this while I was on the task. I learned a lot on the task force. So I believe this was a phrase that I learned on the task force that just has really stuck with me, because what it says at its core is that, and this connects to the point about representation and the work of Black Rep for Kids, is that if you're only seeing yourself in the victim seat, right, it creates this kind of, oh my gosh, like there's one more thing that is negatively impacting me. And if you don't see yourself in having expertise, you don't see yourself represented in the seat of designer, the seat of, maybe there's some strategies, solutions. There may be things that I'm doing just in my home that I don't even realize I'm doing, or I realize I'm doing it, but I just don't see it as a strategy or a solution. That if we were able to bring those examples to bear and help people see themselves in the solution seat, then it could also alleviate this level of anxiety, this level, again, of, because I worry about climate anxiety with Black children and families, because we have so much we're already having to manage and deal with. There is an element of, oh my gosh, now you're telling me I also need to be worried about the climate. Like I'm literally trying to get out the front door and get my child to school, hope that they're being educated well, and pray that they get home safely, and now also have to deal with climate. So I think that, the important role that Black Rep for Kids can really play is the role that you all that we are focused on, which is how do we balance bringing a real understanding and awareness of how climate change is impacting Black children and families, while at the same time leveraging the expertise, leveraging the experience, helping bring more diverse voices to the field, and framing the challenges in such a way that, yes, these challenges are real, and what are the strategies and solutions that our communities have in their realm that we can really leverage and bring to the forefront. I think the other piece to add to that is that, we could just do a much better job of just leveraging the curiosity of children. And so there's a real, I think, really beautiful way of tapping into how naturally curious children are, especially in the first 8 years, about their community, about nature, they're just curious about everything. But there's this real interesting and almost organic link between climate exploration and children's curiosity, because they want to be outside. They want to be playing in the dirt. They actually want to play in the rain. They don't want to go in. And so how do we leverage that and bring that out in media and in stories we tell? And again, the ways in which we bring awareness to the needs, but also think about the diversity of voice and expertise to bring real strategies and solutions to the climate change issues.
Well, that's really important. And I think one of the other elements that you raised has to do with the curiosity of children. And for those children who are, 8 and below, the younger children, the melting of the glaciers and the rising of the ocean are probably more anxiety producing than they need to be. And cognitively speaking, that doesn't really make sense for them. But what you were talking about in terms of learning about the elements of nature and how things happen when the weather changes, and that curiosity, I think, are the building blocks for children learning that there is a world that we care about and learn about, so that as they move down that continuum, and we ask them now, you have to heal the earth, they have something to hold on to, because that's very, very scary. So I think that this whole notion of giving children access to different ways of experiencing the world in the real hands-on space, and how we portray that in picture books, storybooks, etc., I think give us a great opportunity. And so here again, we're curious to know what our listeners are thinking in terms of the potential contributions of Black Rep for Kids. And so for you listeners, if you're hearing this and want to identify any additional areas our project can plug into and extend other ongoing efforts to help Black children and their families discuss, prepare for, and respond to these various climate-related threats and solutions, please let us know. So that's just a little plug to get some more engagement.
Absolutely.
So what are you seeing in terms of the way conversations around climate change and Black Americans are being framed right now? And what stands out to you with regards to the current representations of Black voices? So in other words, what are you currently hearing? What are you seeing and feeling that we're moving towards in terms of building more opportunities to understand this notion of climate?
Yeah, so what I would say is that it connects a little bit to the last question. There's a futurist who talks about helping people understand that the future doesn't have to be this kind of unknown thing that's just gonna happen to me, Because when we think about it that way, that's when it becomes very scary and anxiety producing. That we could really think about the future as ours to create. And so when I think about the important work of Black Rep for Kids, and I think about this question you're asking me now, and what we just talked about around the curiosity of children, is I think that there's a real role, and there's a real timing. There's a good timing right now to help children, to help our communities really see, and actually really sort of, we're dependent on not thinking of the future as the scary thing that's just out there. We really do need to work together to think about it as something that is ours to create. And so when I think about representation, I think about, that's one of the things that representation creates for people, is this feeling, this empowerment. You've used the word resiliency, this resiliency to understand, oh, it's not just something that's going to happen. There's a role I can play. There's something that I can do. I can be a part of, and not just I can be a part. It's actually really dependent on me to be a part of the strategies and the solutions that might come into play. And so I think when I think about where we are in current day with these conversations, I think, one, the fact that there is a Black Rep for Kids. I think the fact that we're having this podcast conversation, the fact that NBCDI has an outcome dedicated to climate, and as you've noted, aligned with representation and narrative, says a lot about how far we've come in bringing this conversation to a place where Black Americans, Black people, I would say more broadly, are engaged in the conversation. And in our engagement in the conversation always comes the push to push. Whenever we get involved, we're going to push the fields or whatever it is further, because we're going to ask. I mean, that's why you need the point of view, the expertise of people on the margins, because they see it from a broader perspective. They don't just see their sort of narrow individual identity. And so now that we're in these conversations, that means that we are pushing, we're challenging, and we're continuing to bring these questions up of diversity, of representation. And so I think that's where we are. I think that we are, the climate change field, if you will, there's still a lot to be done, especially when we think about media and educational spaces, to ensure that our voices, our images, our thoughts are represented properly. But I think we're really at this tipping point of pushing from the margins to the center. And I think that's an important place for us to be.
Well, when it comes to improving and increasing representation in Black stories, in climate media, in story worlds, I'd like to talk a little bit more about what you'd like to see, and also maybe get a glimpse into what you have as some ideas for the future. Because at one point I heard a conversation about possibly finding ways to recognize creators of books. And so how do we center this notion of Black joy and positive stories? And what can we do to ensure that these things come out in the stories about Black experiences of climate change? And how do we give recognition to those who are creating them? That's a little extra there that may give me some ideas of what is in the future at NBCDI.
I love the extra peek, a little peek into the future of NBCDI. So absolutely. So we are going to be launching an initiative that will bring both awareness and celebration to folks in the book space, toy space, media space, creators across those three areas that are really doing the work of ensuring accurate. I think we need to also put that word in there, ensuring accurate representation, portrayals of Black voices and characters into their stories. And so that is something very specific that we're working on. And we feel like, the reasons we need to do that are, again, we don't want to just sort of wag the finger. We want to really think through, given all the information we have, given all the data we have, what are ways in which we can bring strategies and solutions and really empower people, to do that. So our work is really around shaping narratives, informing and empowering. And so we see this opportunity to honor and celebrate creators as a way of informing, as a way of shaping narratives, and as a way of empowering people to see the value in representation and ensuring that Black voices show up in characters and in stories. So that's, as you mentioned, as you sort of named it, this awards is something that NBCDI will be launching in the next couple of months, actually in the fall.
Well, I'm excited. I didn't want to give away anything, but but I'm excited about that because, when we think about this, and we also think about what role do you think climate scientists and other researchers should play when it comes to educating Black children, creating story worlds for Black children, especially about climate change. How is there a convergence that we can begin to see happening that bring those individuals to the table, and particularly the solutions builders who also happen to be African American, who also happen to be environmentalists and climate scientists, and then those individuals in the community who are doing the environmental and climate justice work? How do you sort of see maybe bringing them together in terms of moving in this direction of more accurate and engaging ideas about climate stories and story worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the power of convening. And so I think that really just bringing intentionality to convening folks is important. It's so interesting because, it's not as if we don't have, as you mentioned, climate scientists and activists and environmental justice researchers and folks out there who are Black people who are in this field. And it's like, we just really need to more intentionally lift them up, bring them to, the visibility that they need. And I think that Black Rep for Kids is a great way to do that. I think NBCDI, as a member of Black Rep for Kids and as our organization, ensuring that we are doing things like this awards that you brought up. We also have an annual conference. And so ensuring that they're brought to these conferences, but in really intentional ways. Again, I keep using that word because I think that often what happens is it's surface level, our engagement. What I really want to like hone in on is we are dependent on their expertise. And so how do we make sure that we're aware of and leveraging their research, their resources, their voices, everything that they're writing and thinking about and putting together. And so like when we think about our annual conference, this is a place that our attendees often describe as a safe space to be able to go and focus on Black children and families, and a place where they can go and either be introduced to, be in relationship with, learn from Black researchers, scholars, expertise at just a different level. And so I think it's important for us to just continue to be really intentional about creating space and convening this expertise. so that we're really co-designing strategies together.
And I think that's the other reason why we're excited to be working in collaboration with NBCDI and the work that is ongoing, because as people will know as they look at our materials, that there is an unconference that we're going to be holding in October of 2024. But the work does not end there. And we're excited to be able to be engaged with NBCDI, because we want to continue to see this work have a place and space as well. And so this kind of conversation, regarding bringing people together, researchers, educators, parents, media creators, that can help guide the production of, climate literature. Those are the things that we also want to hear about from the standpoint of people who may already be doing that. So one of the things I'm going to say to our listeners is, if you're engaged in doing any of this type of work or know of others who are, we're all ears, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about that. And those are the kinds of things we can certainly share. And the other thing I wanted to mention too, Leah, is that the intersectionality issues and cross-national conversations are very much a part of what we're dealing with. I remember not too long ago, I saw this article on why better insights on ethnicity are important for climate communication that came out of the UK. And it happens to be that it's research by Charles Ogunbode, who is, I believe he's a Nigerian, but anyway, he's based in the UK doing work on disproportionality and how the research about people of color in the UK, how they're disproportionately impacted, but there is a paucity of research around their experience of and engagement in the climate change conversation. So your vision and your direction is going to be really, really important for that to take place here where we are. But also there's a cross-national piece to this that I think is already opening the door. So what's your burning question or thought? Are there any things you'd most like to talk about or share with other individuals working to increase and improve Black representation in this conversation, in this notion of being able to be solutions builders as well as supporters and creators of opportunities for children not to be anxious and overwrought? So, what are some things that come to mind you want to talk about with others?
Absolutely. Wow, a couple of things. And one you just sort of bridged is the global nature, no pun intended, but the global nature of what we're talking about. And I just feel, that we should be thinking together. And so I appreciate you bringing the researcher to the conversation. Like, we should be really thinking together globally about climate change and environmental justice issues, because it isn't just something that's isolated or unique to the United States. It really is a global issue. And so I'm really curious about what that looks like. And how we do that. I would also say, I think the climate, the anxiety piece is just a piece that, is something that we also need to think about, is how do we continue to empower, inform, and shape the understanding of climate change and its impact on our communities in such a way that doesn't just tire people out and further fatigue them, but really does support, as I mentioned, empower folks to be more solution driven and to really think about the kinds of strategies that could be helpful. I think there's something also really, necessary and interesting about asking a question around what is it that Black people, communities of color, Indigenous folks are already doing? Because, I say this kind of joking, but not joking, kind of smiling. We're still here. We somehow manage generation after generation to continue to be here and to smile and to find joy in some really challenging and troubling times. I don't necessarily believe in the putting it all in magic. I don't necessarily fall into the it's all, Black girl magic box. I think there's some magical parts of it, but it's also some real strategy and work. And so curious about what are we already doing? What are we doing again in our communities, in our homes, in our neighborhoods that might seem like small things, but small things put together add up to really big transformative changes. And so I think that, really, honing in on some of these ways of being, ways that we operate, ways that we make it through our daily lives, and lifting those up and really figuring out that's some of the expertise that I'm even talking about. Is some of it is the very academic, sort of big picture expertise. Some of it is the practitioner expertise. Yes, we need to bring all of that to bear. And some of it is, and maybe even a lot of it is, talking to parents and educators and providers and, just ordinary people that are, again, making it. We do it, we make it. And so how do we also kind of privilege the expertise that comes from everyday living and creating solutions and understanding what we can do to change the world by understanding what people are doing on a daily basis.
Great. Well, that is the direction that I'm hoping that our work with Black Rep for Kids will engender in the future, keep people moving in that direction. So before we let you go, we wanted to ask about any other individuals or groups or resources that we should be aware of. I mean, are there any people or organizations or things that you think might be of importance to those who are listening today? I mean, that are top of mind, just anything that might be useful. And then anything that we can share, we certainly will be sharing in our resources following this podcast as well. But I just wanted to give you a chance to think about that.
Yeah. So I would say there are a few advocacy organizations out there, like the Power Coalition for Equity and Justice, which I believe is based in Louisiana, that's doing some incredible work. There's the Partnership for Southern Equity, PSE, which is based here in Atlanta, but really has a focus on the South, broadly speaking, the region. And they are also a really incredible advocacy organization that has climate and environmental justice as one of their focus areas. And then I would say, and we're NBCDI is in relationship with that organization. We're also a part of the Council on Black Health, which is a council that is uniting national civil rights organizations to focus on Black health, again, broadly speaking. And so environmental justice and its relationship to climate change is one of our pillars on that council. And then, of course, I would, name that NBCDI has an affiliate network of 24 affiliates across the country. And if you visit our website at nbcdi.org, you can see who those affiliates are, if there's an affiliate in your community, the work that they're working on. And each of our affiliates has something they're doing to advance our agenda of the 8 essential outcomes. And so you can see where folks are working. And we always invite people, if you have interest in starting an affiliate, if there's not one in your community, then please reach out to us. We are really interested in scale and growth of the network so that, again, we have more more diverse voices and representation on this issue. And again, really, even more so the intersection between climate change and the early childhood developmental years, which we know are just really tender years for all children, and in particular, as we focus on Black children.
Well, I want to say that it's important for us to continue supporting these spaces and places to do this work. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am of the work that you're doing and proud of the work, because I followed you all of those. I remember when you were an intern, because see, I'm 2 years older than Water and 1 year younger than her. So I remember that. But I'm glad that you're carrying on a vision with the organization for this mantle that looks at approaches from a Black perspective. And I also want to say that you have really provided us with some essential information and perspectives to think about as we build our STEM-related knowledge into children's climate change literature and hands-on experiences, but also how we think about our work, how we think about our perspectives. So Dr. Austin, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today and serving on our NSF Projects Leadership and Advisory Team.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful conversation.
And we'll look forward to continuing the conversation with you. And thank you to our podcast listeners. That's it for now, but be sure to return to the website to get additional information or to share. That's it for now. See you next time. Thanks for listening to Roots of Representation. If you'd like to comment on this episode, please head over to blackrepforkids.knowledge.org. Our website also contains free resources and more information about the project, which is led by Knowledge in collaboration with the Highlights Foundation, the National Black Child Development Institute, the Association of Children's Museums, and a panel of nationally recognized advisors. Remember, Black Rep for Kids isn't just a podcast. It's an essential part of the project's culminating experience, which will be a 2-day unconference event held in fall 2024. Head over to the website to register now. And in the meantime, let's keep the conversation going. You can also share your ideas and resources for amplifying Black voices and stories in children's STEM literature at blackrepforkids.knowledge.org. Roots of Representation is produced by ABF Creative, an award-winning podcast network that creates cultural and emotional connections through podcasts. The series is funded by the National Science Foundation's Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program under grant number 2314101. Any opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this podcast series are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation. Roots of Representation, the podcast centering Black climate story worlds for young minds.